On behalf of the Worcester State College community, I am very pleased to have all of you here, particularly pleased to welcome Ambassador Chowdhury, representing and the representatives of the Center for Global Community and World Law, and then also our Worcester State Center for Global Studies. There are special guests today, and we are looking forward to the unique presentation and the dialogue on building a culture of peace in the world. At Worcester State College, we encourage and we nurture educational opportunities and dialogue, just such as this today, to improve the well-being of our world. These conversations begin locally so that change can occur globally. Today, the college, our faculty and students are looking at our many challenges through the eyes of people throughout our very small world. And so again, it is our pleasure, and we are very grateful to be able to host this very special event. And I would now ask Dr. Joseph Baratta, Professor of History and Political Science at Worcester State College, who is a member also of the WSC Center for Global Studies and a local representative for the Center for Global Community and World Law. Thank you very much and enjoy this evening.
Our guest today is a retired ambassador of Bangladesh and an Undersecretary General of the United Nations for least developed countries at the United Nations. He has been the moving spirit behind the culture of peace, about which he will speak to us today. To appreciate the significance of this visit, I feel I must say a few words about the United Nations. Since the Bush administration has, since 2000, shown deep disrespect for the UN, and the American people have been led to think the UN is something alien and useless. The United Nations was established by Americans. After World War I, President Wilson guided the world to establish the League of Nations, although the Senate rejected U.S. membership. When the League proved to be too weak to stop the drift toward war, President Franklin Roosevelt tried again by establishing the UN in 1945. For years, the United States, including new leaders like Eleanor Roosevelt in the field of human rights, supported the UN and guided our foreign policy within the new common standards. But a change took place about 1975 as new nations emerged from the European colonial empires, like our speaker's home country, Bangladesh. The new nations, notably a famous group of 77, were hopeful that the UN could help them overcome their economic underdevelopment. These countries had a majority in the General Assembly. In 1974, they introduced a plan called the New International Economic Order, or NEO, and they used their new majority voting power to advance it. The United States found itself in a minority, yet it would not be coerced by a third world majority. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a U.S. representative to the UN, wrote a book called A Dangerous Place in 1975, and that book marks a shift. To him, the UN was the dangerous place. It actually fell to President Carter to kill the NEO by benign neglect by 1980. Ever since, U.S. policy toward the UN has been, despite lip service of support, basically one of damage limitation. President Bush is not the first to turn away from the UN. We seem to be forgetting why the UN was established: to maintain international peace and security. We need to find ways to respect and cooperate with other nations in order to avoid mistakes like the present war in Iraq. Hence the importance of the visit today of a high UN official to our campus and our city, Worcester, deep in central Massachusetts. He has some ideas of what ordinary citizens can do to build peace. Peace is understood not as the interval between wars, but as the end of current wars and eventually of all wars. Peace is a positive goal, the presence of justice. To make peace will involve new political leadership, diplomacy, and the United Nations. But to make new leadership possible, it must be empowered by the will of the people. The people must demand creative new leadership and must support leaders who take great risks to lead our country and other countries into fundamentally peaceful relations. That is where building the culture of peace is important. A decade devoted to building a culture of peace was proposed to the UN by the UN General Assembly for 2001 to 2010. It consists of a series of action steps that people in their day-to-day lives can take to build public pressure in favor of peace. For instance, respect all life, reject violence, share with others, listen to others. Our guest today served as Bangladesh's ambassador to Chile, Nicaragua, Peru, and Venezuela. He became the representative of Bangladesh to the United Nations in New York from 1996 to 2001. At the UN, he served as president of the UN Security Council for 2 terms in 2000 and 2001. While at the Security Council, he initiated Resolution 1325 on the role of women in peace and security. The ambassador has been particularly close to issues involving the poorer developing countries. His highest post was Undersecretary General and High Representative for the least developed countries. He initiated the declaration by the United Nations General Assembly of the International Decade for the Culture of Peace and Nonviolence for the Children of the World, 2001-2010. And he won passage of the Program of Action on a Culture of Peace. I understand the culture of peace as an indirect approach to building public support for the patient work of the United Nations without arousing the antagonism of the sovereign member states, including the United States under the Bush administration. I am sure he will tell us more, both from the point of view of government policy and from that of the grassroots. Our guest today is an articulate, seasoned diplomat and international civil servant, most unusual for the second largest city in inland Massachusetts. We will have time for questions from the audience. It is my honor then to introduce to you Ambassador Anwarul K. Chowdhury.
Good afternoon to all of you. Greetings. President Ashley, thank you very much for your warm words of welcome and your gracious presence among the students this afternoon. Professor Baratta, you very graciously introduced me, and I hope I live up to the expectations here. Your perceptive comments about the United Nations, the role of that universal organization is very, very relevant here. As we meet here, some of the worst violence are taking place against civilians, magnitude and intensity of which we have not seen in recent years. Clearly, the hope that the new millennium would be a harbinger of peace has turned out to be rather misplaced. The end of the Cold War that promised a new era of global cooperation and the technological breakthroughs at the task of the last millennium have not delivered the sustainable peace that the world yearned for and hoped. The lesson in this, I believe, is that however much the world around us changes, we cannot achieve peace without a change in our minds, and therefore in the global consciousness. The wealth and the technology can only give us the opportunity to better the world. We must have the mind and willingness to seize that opportunity. We must have the culture of peace developed in each one of us, both as an individual as well as a member of the global society. We must never forget that technology and wealth can be put to destructive use too. The difference between war and peace, between poverty and prosperity, between death and life is essentially made in our minds. As we embark on our journey for the 21st century, we envisage many promises within the grasp of humankind. We see immense possibilities. We have the power to change the world for the better. We have the technology and the wealth. With collective efforts and will, we can eliminate hunger, eradicate disease, fight malnutrition and poverty, and create a fulfilling future for all. We pay tribute to human creativity and genius for the progress achieved by humankind. For all the advances made in science, literature, arts, management, and medicine, the human mind has played the pivotal role. It has made the world a better place to live in. But there is another side to the human mind as well. That other side is capable of breeding intolerance, harboring hatred, and inflicting pain on fellow human beings. It is this side of the human mind that poses the gravest challenge for the humanity. The challenge for us will be to prevent the human mind from becoming consumed by ignorance, fear, violence, and intolerance. We have seen in the past century alone what these can do to undermine the progress of the human race. We have seen a culture of war and violence spread its venomous tentacles, threatening to destroy all that is good, moral, and just. The dawning of the new millennium gives us a scope to take lessons from our past in order to build a new and better tomorrow. One lesson learned is that to prevent history repeating itself, the values of nonviolence, tolerance, and democracy will have to be inculcated in every woman and man, children and adults alike. All of you would have heard it many times, but I would like to quote from the UNESCO Constitution one more time because of its relevance and value. And I quote, "Since war began in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed." End of quote. As the former Secretary General of the United Nations, and Nobel Peace Laureate Kofi Annan had said, and I quote, "Over the years, we have come to realize that it is not enough to send peacekeeping forces to separate warring parties. It is not enough to engage in peace-building efforts after societies have been ravaged by conflict. It is not enough to conduct preventive diplomacy. All of this is essential work, but we want enduring results. We need, in short, a culture of peace." End of quote. The first step towards examining the road to peace should start with an appreciation of the changing nature of conflicts. Gone are the days of war between states for conquest, extension of spheres of influence in the name of ideology. Today's world and its problems are becoming increasingly more interdependent and interconnected due to globalization and advancement of science and technology. Most disturbing is that often today's atrocities are directed to people living in the same community or neighborhood. Hatred and intolerance have blurred the vision of the perpetrators. Interdependency of the world, if not addressed with sanity, can change into a social, economic, nuclear, or environmental catastrophe. The magnitude of these problems requires all human beings to work together in finding new, workable, and realistic solutions. The need for a culture of peace is evident as we reflect on how our civilization has succumbed from time to the human frailties of greed, ambition, myopia, and selfishness. We have seen that heinous acts are committed under the veil of public mandates, when in fact they are the wishes of the few in power, be they economic, political, military, or even religious. At other times, atrocities are committed out of a mistaken fear of the unknown. The efforts at peace and reconciliation have to be based on an understanding of this new reality. Global efforts towards peace and reconciliation can only succeed with a collective approach built on trust, dialogue, and cooperation. For that, we have to build a grand alliance amongst all, particularly with the proactive involvement and participation of civil society and young people like you. No social responsibility is greater nor task heavier than that of securing peace on our planet. Non-violence can truly flourish when the world is free of poverty, hunger, discrimination, exclusion, intolerance, and hatred. When women and men can realize their highest potential and live a secure and fulfilling life. Until then, each and every one of us would have to contribute, collectively and individually, to build peace through non-violence. Non-violence is not a garment to be put on and off at will. Its seat is in the heart, and it must be an inseparable part of our very being. This is a quotation from Mahatma Gandhi. Here I would also join Martin Luther King Jr. in saying, and I quote, "At the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love." End of quote. Why do I put such emphasis on culture of peace? 3 reasons. First, it targets individuals. There cannot be true peace unless the mind is at peace. Second, it brings together all actors. In addition to states and intergovernmental and international organizations, actions to promote culture of peace can be undertaken by parents, family members, teachers, artists, journalists, students, and community and religious leaders. People from all walks of life. And third, it sets its goals not on the principle of eye for an eye, but on tolerance, solidarity, and dialogue to settle differences and heal wounds. The paradox that we perceive in today's world is mind-boggling. On one hand, through the process of globalization, an irreversible trend toward a global village has been established, while on the other, divisions and distrust have increased. Progress in the fields of science and technology, trade and communications has boosted global wealth to levels that seemed unreachable few decades ago. We can see immense possibilities. We have the power to change the world for the better. However, great differences still exist between peoples and regions. Disparities and inequalities have, over the years, only augmented, causing the world to enter into a new era of insecurity and uncertainty. We are living in years when people fear deadly attacks by terrorists, suffer from genocide, or massive violations of human rights carried out by, on many occasions, their own governments. Despite the great advances in science and medicine, millions are dying from HIV/AIDS and other diseases. Despite all the progress, too many people live in extreme poverty and hunger, or do not have access to as basic things as clean water or education and health. Unfortunately, worst victims in this everywhere are women and children. Poverty and lack of opportunities deprive people of their dignity as human beings, leaving them hopeless and incapable of pursuing the kind of life they may deserve. Marginalization and abuse because of ethnicity, gender, or religion, repression or bias, violence or intolerance are all closely linked to poverty and the concurrent lack of basic human rights and opportunity. We must not forget that it is not only morally unsupportable, but also practically unrealistic to achieve sustainable peace without addressing squarely the crushing problems of poverty and human insecurity. There will be no development without peace, and no peace without development. In my view, 2 things are needed to achieve and sustain peace in the world and break the vicious cycle of poverty and conflict. 1, we need to improve the objective living conditions of the whole of humanity through poverty eradication, economic development, good governance, and democratization, and respect for human rights. Second, we also need to change the subjective conditions that breed conflict, our beliefs, our prejudices, by cultivating the values of tolerance and understanding. In short, a culture of peace in our mindsets. It is particularly important to ensure that children benefit from education and upbringing that promote peaceful resolution of conflict, tolerance, and respect for human dignity. This change in our mindset and inculcating the culture of peace is a fundamental change in human nature. In our conventional wisdom, differences are perceived to trigger confrontation and conflict, always and everywhere. I, however, believe differences are not a threat. It should be perceived as ever-energizing diversity that has fueled human progress. In today's world, more so, it should be seen as the essence of a new humanity, a new global civilization based on inner oneness and outer diversity. The flourishing of culture of peace will generate the mindset in us that is a prerequisite for the transition from force to reason, from conflict and violence to dialogue and peace. Culture of peace will provide the bedrock to support a stable, progressing, and prospering world, a world that is finally at peace with itself. The journey that we commenced into the new millennium will demand strength, dedication, and sacrifice from each one of us. We have to keep striving with all of our intellectual and spiritual energy and determination for a better world based on principles of freedom, justice, democracy, tolerance, solidarity, respect for diversity, dialogue, and understanding. And there is no doubt that the most effective way to make a difference, to bring a change, is to work together, building on trust and collaboration among individuals, within the family, in larger communities, in our societies, and at the same time also at global levels. And here I thank President Ashley mentioning about thinking globally but acting locally. Very perceptive comment. It is in this context I take immense pride that our beloved and sometimes unduly maligned world body, the United Nations, has been at the forefront in building a culture of peace throughout the world. The adoption in 1999 by the UN General Assembly of the Declaration and Program of Action on Culture of Peace was a watershed event. It was an honor for me to chair the 9-month-long negotiations that led to the adoption of this historic norm-setting document that is considered as one of the most significant legacies of the United Nations that would endure generations. The United Nations work has been particularly bolstered by the broad-based support of civil society. We are now in the final years of the International Decade for a Culture of Peace and Non-Violence for the Children of the World, proclaimed by the United Nations. This decade, covering the period, as Professor Baratta mentioned, 2001 to 2010, is spearheading a global movement for culture of peace. A key ingredient in building culture of peace is education. Peace education needs to be accepted in all parts of the world, in all societies and countries, as an essential element in creating culture of peace. To meet effectively the challenges posed by the present complexity of our time, the young of today deserves a radically different education, one that does not glorify war, but educates for peace, non-violence, and international cooperation. They need the skills and knowledge to create and nurture peace for their individual selves, as well as for the world they belong to. Peace studies should be incorporated in all educational institutions as part of their curricula and should become an essential part of our educational process as reading and writing. We should all mobilize in our own spheres of activities for peace education. In this context, I would encourage you to support the global campaign for peace education, which has been launched in May 1999 by a highly respected global non-governmental organization based in New York with the name The Hague Appeal for Peace. You should remember that peace education does not simply mean learning about conflicts and how to resolve them peacefully. It should also involve participation of young people in expressing their own ideas and cooperating with each other in order to eliminate violence in our societies. In its essence, peace education, as articulated in the Hague Agenda, encourages reflection, critical thinking, cooperation, and responsible action. It promotes multiculturalism, values of dignity and equality. Their campaign rightly emphasizes that culture of peace will be achieved when citizens of the world understand global problems, have the skills to resolve conflicts constructively, and know and live by international standards of human rights, gender, and racial equality. Appreciate cultural diversity and respect the integrity of the earth. Such learning cannot be achieved without international, sustained, and systematic education for peace. Let us remember that the work for peace is a continuous process. Each of us can make a difference in that process. I'm confident that you will make every effort to rid yourself and your fellow men and women of the evils of intolerance and prejudice, ignorance and selfishness that compel us to repeat the cycle of violence. Only then the world will be a better place to live for us, for our children, and for our grandchildren. Seed of peace exists in all of us. It must be nurtured, cared for, and promoted by us all to flourish. Peace cannot be imposed from outside. It must be realized from within. As the great apostle of peace, Mahatma Gandhi, has said, and I quote, "We must be the change we wish to see." End of quote, and thank you. And as